Good morning, everyone. Meteorologist John Homenuk here with Empire Weather. Happy to take you through our latest long-range video update, and I wanted to start just by taking a look at what's been going on here over the last 60 days. It's been well discussed that we have a couple areas of very dry weather, one of them here in the Pacific Northwest, and then another one here that's developed across a large majority of the central United States, including the agriculture belt, where we've seen areas of much drier than normal weather over the last 60 days. Meanwhile, it's been wetter than normal in the upper plains here, the upper Midwest, and then into parts of the Montana and the Rockies. And then into the Northeast, we've seen a reversal in that drought pattern there as well during this time frame. But this is the focus here as we head into the next couple of weeks. And the pattern initially is not going to do us many favors. So let's take a look at what's going on here across the hemisphere. I want to start with what's happening in the next couple of days through the rest of this week. And what we see is a very stout northwest flow across the central United States. This big trough is going to ensure a couple things. First of all, it's going to bring air down from Canada into the United States. So we're expecting cooler than normal temperatures across this region. But second of all, this kind of northwest flow is a dry flow. It keeps a lot of the moisture that we'd like to be advecting up here this way. It pushes it away from the area. So if we really break down exactly what's happening in the next couple of days and look at the model forecast, we have a frontal boundary coming through here as we move through the middle part of the week, really today into Wednesday. This is associated with this long cold front that's actually coming down from Canada. So eventually that front will sweep east. We're expecting this to kind of be in and out here as we move through the middle to latter part of the week. And then we have this broad upper low that's just sort of spinning across the Great Lakes and Northern Plains. So when that happens, we're likely looking at a drier than normal period here again. If we look at total precipitation from that front, we can see some locally enhanced areas of precip, and it'll be important to pick this rain up because this area has been very dry. But still, on a broad scale, this thing is kind of in and out of here, and so by the time we get to the late week and the weekend, we're back to this drier pattern again. If we look at precipitation anomalies on the ensembles in 5-day increments, here's our frontal boundary initially, right, that moves through. And then as we move into the early part of next week on the latest data, you can see that dryness is kind of back in the forecast here, at least as we move through the next several days behind that front. And one of the reasons is a continuation of that northwest flow. If we look at the models, this pattern is still featuring a ridge on the west coast and a trough here in the Great Lakes and Northeast. And your flow through the atmosphere here is out of the northwest. You have a northwest flow during this time frame. So what you get as a result here on your 7-day increments moving ahead and looking forward is you have temperatures that are below normal across this region. You have a northwest flow moving through this area, and you have drier than normal conditions as well. This is where a large majority of your warmth is going to be through about the 20th of October, and you can nearly guarantee drier than normal weather with this cooler northwest flow just keeping that air coming down through this general region. But as we always like to do, I think it's one thing to look at weather models and say, oh, this is what the weather model is showing. It's another thing to back up and try to understand why that pattern is happening. So that can also tip us off as to when things are going to change. If we back up and look at the Pacific Ocean, and I do this a lot, the Pacific is a huge, important factor in our weather. I want to look at what's happening with this pattern right now, because right now in the Pacific, we have a very fractured pattern. You have multiple waves of the Pacific jet. You have a cutoff low here sitting in the central Pacific. You have another wave out here, another sort of ridge in this general region. And this whole thing is kind of just a mess, right? There's so much going on here. But it's all broken. It's all a mess of an evolution. But with this upper low spinning here, your flow in the atmosphere is pumping your ridge up off the coast, the west coast of North America. And so if we look at this from a height anomaly perspective, all of a sudden it makes a lot of sense why we have this ridge on the west coast of North America. You have a big trough here in the Gulf of Alaska. You're pumping this ridge up here into the western United States. And all these disturbances that come up over the top of this are going to drop down into the United States. So go back to the U.S. view. Here's that ridge, and here's your northwest flow as a result of that pattern in the Pacific. So that all makes a lot of sense. But if we go back and look at what's happening, the seeds of a pattern change are already occurring by the time we get closer to the 15th of the month, because all of a sudden that broken sort of, not put together Pacific pattern is starting to look more like a Pacific jet. And then as we get closer to the 20th, that's when things really start to change. This is a very long, very impressive jet extension. And all this momentum in the jet stream is going to traverse eastward and take the ridging that was here in the western U.S. and knock it down to the east. This is as impressive as a signal as you will get from a Pacific jet extension. The models are starting to pick up on this. If we go and look at the North American forecast, you can see this Pacific jet extension coming in here. So initially, we have a pattern that looks like this. We have a big amplified ridge in the western U.S. But as that jet extension comes through, I want you guys to watch what happens here on the models. That ridge, all of a sudden, gone. And the pattern changes dramatically. Now we have a big trough developing into the western United States. We have a ridge that is beginning to develop in the eastern U.S. And if we look at the momentum through the jet stream, we have quite a bit of momentum and activity. This signals an increase in storminess. It signals warmth developing in the central and eastern United States. And it signals an active Pacific pattern, which is a major change to the pattern that we've been experiencing for the last couple of weeks. If we look at what this means from the U.S. perspective, the first thing the models are always going to pick up on is a temperature change, right? So initially we have this big northwest flow. We've talked about this over the last couple of days. But watch how this changes once that Pacific jet extension occurs. All of a sudden, our temperatures begin to warm substantially across the central United States. And if we look at what's happening from a height perspective as well, we have a deep trough developing in the Pacific Northwest, the western U.S. And if we look at the jet stream, we have an impressive jet traversing the country. This is all but certainly going to lead to an increase in precipitation risks during this time. The ensemble is going to have some trouble picking it out at this range, but you can see this pattern, which had been dominated by this dry northwest flow for several days, still here all the way through the 20th. We're still northwest flow. Look at the ensemble light up after that as we get into the extended. All of a sudden, it's picking up on the opportunity for storms. For this jet stream to deliver this moisture, you're now going to be returning some moisture from the Atlantic and the Gulf. And it's very likely that we're going to see a more active pattern develop as we move into the end of October. From a temperature perspective, this also likely means we're going to see a very substantial warm-up, and we're likely to see the models continuing to pick up on this over the next couple of days as we move through this week. Obviously, big pattern changes like this are very difficult on the models, so it's going to take some time, and we're expecting some volatility. But this is a substantial change to the pattern overall as we move into the late October time period. The weeklies are still in good agreement that as we move into November, this pattern is going to continue. We're expecting this warmth to be more expansive than what the weeklies are suggesting. Our November forecast features a very warm pattern across this general region, and we expect that will continue here on the models as we move into the next couple of days. Likely going to see a fairly substantial increase in temperature as this pattern begins to warm up. Again, the answers to our pattern right now, they all lie in the Pacific Ocean. And if we can even go back and just look at that pattern for one more moment here in the Pacific and get an idea as to what this means. One more time, we are in a La Nina-driven pattern. This pattern is still very, very much dominated by a La Nina. And when you see a jet extension like this being modeled and traversing the Pacific Ocean, this is a high confidence pattern change at this time. There's some details that we'll need to kind of break down. But as we move into the latter part of October and that Pacific jet extension begins to reach the United States, we're going to see this jet momentum come in here. We're going to see a more active pattern develop across the central and possibly the northern third of the U.S. And we're likely going to see a substantial warm up in temperature across the country as well. As we move into late October. So we'll have the latest on this over the next couple of days as it comes into better focus on the models. As always, if you have any questions, please do not hesitate to reach out to us. We're here to help. And we'll be back with another update tomorrow, which is Wednesday morning. Have a great Tuesday, guys. Talk to you soon.